So that's what you heard there. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Academy for Writers. I am very excited to be here today, in particular because this is one of my favorite events that we do. So thanks to all of our members. I see a lot of people here today, and also thanks to those of you who are not members, but who are able to join us. Some of you coming all the way from Spain, so bonus points for that. Those who know the Creative Academy know that we love to celebrate. We look for all and any excuses to celebrate, but a book launch is a particular special kind of celebration. For anyone who has done it, writing a book is both one of the most wonderful accomplishments that you will do, and also one of the most challenging things that you will do. So for those of you who are coming and joining us today, one of the things that you need to know is that you are witnessing a victory dance, but this victory dance is coming after a very long and sometimes very challenging and difficult journey. So I appreciate everyone coming. Writers spend a lot of time in their own heads. And so when you have the opportunity to see your book in the real world, it's quite surreal. I did notice that Bonnie just posted her book box opening event online. And so you can, if you want to know what it feels like, you can watch her do it in real time on her website. But it is a chance to see dreams and imagination become actually real. And we are so excited to share this moment with these writers, in particular, a few of them who are doing this for the first time. But I can certainly vouch for those of us who are older and crustier and might have a couple books out in the world, that the experience of having a chance to get your book out and to see it launch is something that is special every single time. So what you can expect is I'm going to introduce each person with a little bit of a short bio, and then I'm going to ask them to tell you a little bit about their book and read just a short amount from that book. We've budgeted sort of that 7 to 10 minutes for each person so we can get through everyone. At the end, I'm also going to share a link where if people want to join the Creative Academy for Writers, if you're not already a member, then we just want you to know that you are more than welcome to join us. Perhaps you have a story to share and you'd like to be the person who is doing a book launch for the next time. And writers who will be launching, just a reminder, I'm going to ask you to share a link to where people can find your books, because I know everyone's going to want to check them out. So with no further ado, I have the delightful pleasure of introducing a good friend of mine and someone who has been with the Creative Academy, I think, since the very beginning. And if not the very beginning, then certainly right up there. So I would like everyone to welcome Gabby Powell. Gabby's been a lover of romance since she first put pen to paper in 8th grade to write her first romance. She writes her novels while living in beautiful British Columbia with her trusty Chinpoo dog as a companion. She also writes gay romances as Gabby Gray and contemporary dark erotic novels as Gabby Black. Gabby's been a member of the Creative Academy for over 3 years, and she's found her peeps. She can't get away from us now. The piece that she's reading from today was originally workshop actually in my blue pencil session, so we have regular workshops. So I've enjoyed seeing it evolve. She enjoys tossing in pieces and seeing what our hive mind has come up with to improve them, and she's always grateful for that. Today, she's going to be sharing with us from her book, The Luminosity of Lorena Harder. And take it away, Gabby. You're muted. There you go.
Okay, of course. I am reading from the first chapter. This is a book that I wrote last year that leads into a series that I have been writing for the past 10 years. So this is my persistence of project, and I'm really grateful to share it. This is from chapter 1. I'm going to have a cuddle party tonight. Loriana liked to make declarations for both their shock value, so she wouldn't back out. She didn't enjoy later admitting not doing to something because she chickened out. Her coworker, Marnie Jones, gaped. The young woman glanced around the library where they worked, confirming they were mostly alone, and she drew closer to her boss, as close as they ever got. While Loriana was free with her physical affections, Marnie was guarded, almost standoffish. I wonder why. None of your business. Is it safe? Marnie's vivid green eyes shone with concern. Are you at least going with someone? This is not sexual, right? She said sexual like she was a matron of 64, not a woman of 24. Trust Marnie to be safety conscious. She didn't even like going out to the parking lot alone after dark in the winter months. Distrustful, despite the fact the lot was located in downtown Mission City, a busy bus stop was nearby, and the lights were so bright it effectively felt like midday. Night came early in December to southern British Columbia. This close to the coast, the weather was also a crapshoot. Often rain, but sometimes snow. Christmas parade was in 2 days, and the women had created a display for the front of the library. Of course it's safe. Loriana longed to reach out to touch her colleague while offering the reassurance, but she knew better. Said colleague didn't look convinced. Cuddle Galore is a group on Facebook. They have platonic parties on the first Thursday of every month. I meant to go last month, but Miss Edna needed me to fix her television. By the time she finished talking, the party long started. Marnie nodded solemnly. You were very generous in doing that. Then she snickered. Dead batteries in the remote. She caught herself placing her fingers to her lips. Her eyes widened as if she couldn't believe her impudence. Loriana reveled in the simple action. Marnie's skittishness always bothered her, and any time the woman loosened up, Loriana was thrilled. They had a no gossip rule in the library, a rule they often broke. Yes, a disappointment to miss the party, but Miss Edna was a fixture at the library, and Loriana was only too happy to help the old woman who'd never admit she was lonely, but clearly was. Miss Edna taught in Mission City for almost 50 years before retiring 15 years ago. She'd instilled the love of books and the drive towards community service. While Loriana attended the woman's third grade class back 3 decades ago, the teacher had encouraged acts of kindness in a way an 8-year-old could understand. Those lessons stuck with her pupils. Well, some more than others. Loriana was a success story. At least one of her cohort had served time in juvie, so not always on the straight and narrow. Back to this party. I wouldn't be diverted. What do you really know about these people? I'm asking the disdain in people. Excuse me, ladies. Sorry to interrupt. Loriana pivoted and her breath caught. The black man stood tall above her own, just over 5'8" height, more than 5 inches taller than Marnie. She tucked a lock of her long, light auburn hair behind her ears. Be looking for something in particular? Never seen you before. He was memorable, not just because of his appearance. He exuded kindness in a way that made her instantly comfortable. The gentleman raised an eyebrow. Loriana, Mitch is installing the new computers. Marnie fluttered her hand. You remember I told you about this. He arrived while you were at lunch. Must have been working on the farthest machine, or I'd have noticed him. The man held out his hand. Mitch Alexander. She held out her hand in return and got the firm shake she was expecting. What she didn't expect was the jolt of electricity, or what felt like electricity. Something ran through her and knocked her right out of her complacency. The man's fingers were callous, but his palms were soft, a noticeable contrast. Nice to meet you, Mr. Alexander. Please, call me Mitch. She didn't miss the hint of amusement in his dark brown eyes. Eyes just a shade darker than her own, she figured. Okay, Mitch, I'm glad you're here, but I'm a little confused why. Is there something wrong with the computer? I'm pretty handy at figuring them out. Miss Harper. Loriana. He acknowledged her correction with a nod. Loriana. He said her name softly in a way that made butterflies flap in her stomach. You're correct, there's nothing wrong with the computers, but they are frankly old. You've done a great job keeping up with the software updates, but the machines themselves are antiquated. I won't argue with that. I'm just not sure why you're here. Mitch's brow furrowed, a little V creasing between his eyebrows. Adorable. Wait, what? I have a work order to replace all 10 computers. Your name's on it. He held her gaze. At least you said you were Loriana Harper. I assume there's only one. I am. But that didn't clear up the confusion. May I see the work order? For sure. He held up his finger. I'll be right back. He held her gaze for one moment longer before heading to the back of the library. Loriana turned to Marnie. I don't understand. We requested the computers 3 months ago, but City Council turned us down because they considered it a large capital expenditure. We were going to try to replace the machines one at a time by cutting costs. Budgeting was her least favorite part of the job, but a necessity as head librarian. If she cut into their book buying budget, then she could replace the computers more quickly. But books were the last things on her list to go. If not for books, the library wouldn't exist. Marnie shrugged. Maybe they changed their minds. And didn't tell me? Loriana scoffed. Not likely. Regan Lister would be lording this over me if that were the case. She tried to like everybody, but Regan always rubbed her the wrong way. The woman had been on city council since the last election, and although young, she was also ambitious. Normally, Loriana admired that trait, but she found it repulsive in Regan, who was as likely to tread on some poor hapless person on her way up as she was to stab that person on the back, given half a chance. Mitch reappeared carrying a clipboard. He handed it to her. Loriana scanned it quickly, noting not only that no prices were on the document, but it was marked paid in full. She handed the clipboard back to Mitch. Who paid you? He looked surprised, then twisted his lips. Why do I find this man so adorable? I received an e-transfer for the entire amount about a week ago. I put all the computer equipment together and came in today. It's going to take me several days to install everything. Excuse me, but have I done something wrong? Of course not. Well, look at that. Marnie was offering the assurances. If you receive payment, then I'm sure there's a logical explanation, or maybe somebody donated the equipment. I mean, you haven't been quiet about your requests. She directed the last comment at Loriana. She was right, of course. Loriana had been clear in her view that the library needed new computers to meet Mission City's growing population. Still, this turn of events stunned her. She hadn't seen it coming. With reluctance, she returned the clipboard. Mitch took it and first met Marnie's gaze, then hers. I offered a discount. Whoever paid me rejected the offer, which was considerate, but I'm always supportive of my community. I understand you have laptops you lend out to patrons who need them. We do. Loriana frowned. Where is he going with this? I'm adding 2 netbooks to the order free of charge. He ducked his head. I didn't want to say anything, but you're bound to notice when you compare the work order to the equipment. You seem like an observant woman. I doubt anything gets past you.
Who doesn't love a guy who loves books and libraries? So I think we're all definitely going to fall in love with him. So thank you so much, Gabby. Make sure you put a link to where we can find your book into the chat window for everybody. And if people have questions for Gabby, I'm going to have you hang on to those because we're going to do a little bit of Q&A at the end so we can get those in there. So next up, I'm excited. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And I'm going to introduce another one of our fine writers, one who I think has an amazing cover. So I'm hoping she'll show the cover when she shows this one off. So this is Carmy Stubbs. She's a reader, writer, storyteller, and poet. She's the lover of word and its power of transformation. She's the author of The 6 Knowings of Asaria, where all of her loves, poems, magic, storytelling, the creative force of the heart, the profound mysteries of life and the search of the divine weave themselves alchemically through text and illustration. She lives in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, with her husband, Antonio, wave Antonio, and the newest member of their family, their sweet little dog, Milo, which I'm starting to notice everyone has dogs and pets of some sort in this, but that's just a new thing that I've noticed. So let us go over to Carmy so she can tell us a little bit about her book and read us also a section if she'd like.
Well, thank you, Eileen, and everybody at the Creative Academy. Thank you also to my friends that are here and family. Gracias, Palmi, Spain. Well, The 6 Knowings of Asaria, here she is. Big book. Is an illustrated metaphysical fantasy for adults and young adults. It's a story of transformation and self-realization, a spiritual quest that takes a young woman called Eileen into 6 magical realms, each with a profound revelation or knowing. Things take an unexpected turn when the storyteller spirals into an existential crisis, while Eileen is lost in one of the realms. Finally, the reader must enter the story to save both Eileen and the storyteller, and ultimately fulfill an ancient promise made at the beginning of humanity, that the 3, Eileen, the storyteller, and the reader, are destined to meet and remember who they really are, a realization that will change our world forever. So the book has text, poetic voice, and illustration. So how did that come about, and why the complex book design? Through fantasy, the book describes a journey of self-realization. But as I was writing, I found that the words were just not enough to express all the mysteries that were unfolding. So the drawings began to happen. They weren't planned. The poetry came naturally for the elemental voices who are like messengers from the divine, guiding us on the quest. The unique page design, thank you, Carmen, is an attempt to express how things are all happening at the same time in different realms and past lives. So there are symbols and colors and columns to help the reader navigate the page. Yes, the reader will be challenged at many levels, not least the opportunity to delve into their own inner world, but hopefully they will have a fun and amazing reading experience. In this excerpt, we are at a point in the story where Eileen and the storyteller have disappeared. The reader answers the call and enters the story to find them. There are two realms, the land of no name, where all has been forgotten, and an airy musical realm belonging to the winged goddess, Eras, where the reader finds themselves. And please bear with me because of the visual cues, like the symbols for each realm. It's not easy to read aloud, but I'll do my best. So it starts off with a mysterious voice that speaks to us. The waters of clarity, the earth of solidness, the heavens of dreams, the fiery furnace of renewal, the mother's way cleanses, transforms, nourishes, births, rests, sees. And now we go to the land of no name, where there is a cave, the cave of Azer. The cave of Azer is a living creature that has been asleep for trillions of eternities. Now, astonishingly, it opens its cave eyes and senses of perception. And what a sight! Two unusual life forms have plunged into the silvery waters. There are sounds of enjoyment and mirth, laughter from a human-like being, and a euphoric bark of an animal being. Oh, how long it has been since the cave listened to such sounds. The cave of Azer smiles in its own cave-like way and makes the walls shake a little. Ah, what a delight to have awoken from my endless sleep, it seems to say. Now we go to the winged goddess realm of Eras. I'm standing in front of Eras. My whole body tingles. She's incredible. My neck aches because I have to pull it back to see her properly. Eileen, says Eras again. She crouches down. It's a bit of a shock to see her this close. Be a perceiver of all, says Rasai. You can relax. No ill shall befall you. Go to Eras, and don't forget I'm always with you. Rasai's voice is inside me. Come, says Eras. It sounds like musical chimes when she speaks. Come. She opens one of her hands and offers me her palm, placing it on the ground. I'm so scared, my legs go all wobbly, but I manage to step onto her hand. It's translucent like she is. I can't really describe it, but I'm put onto her back. She's still crouching. Her back feels like it's full of netting. There's a space in the middle and I lie face down. Silky rainbow-colored threads start coming out of her wings and strap themselves around me. I feel a bit dizzy. I adjust myself and hold on. It's not too uncomfortable. Is this really happening? With the reader on her back and Rasai, as one cannot be without the other, Eras stands up, opens her wings and flies into the open sky. At this, the four take flight also, Shimmerer and Sol in the direction of Eras's rainbow trail of iridescence, whilst Manara and Silas fly downwards towards the land of no name. Leaving a blue flame, the flower tower of glass vanishes. Now we go back to where the cave is in the land of no name. In the depths, the cave of Azer had patiently awaited the promise of its awakening. Patience was the cave's natural resting, and content and peaceful the cave had been and was, for the cave had breathed and lived in calmness. Nevertheless, as with many awakenings, the realization of having been asleep and suddenly realizing you are awake can feel refreshing and exciting. The cave was enjoying every detail, every second, noticing every single feature of the cave. How the silvery water drops danced around the walls, how the walls felt like skin with the drops coming out of his pores in trickling, tickling delight. How the crystals glittered, lighting up the massive pillars, stalagmites and stalactites. Yes, the cave of old shook in childlike awe and glee. Strange rumbling noises to which, if you listened very carefully, sounded like, I've awoken, echoed through the chamber, making ripple upon ripple in the silver liquid that filled most of the cave floor. The man and the dog played together underwater, realizing that this was normal water. This was not normal water at all. This sea felt like liquid, but also had an airy feeling to it, and paradoxically was thick and solid, indescribable. Plus, they could actually breathe underwater. The cave perceived their marveling and shook in merry reciprocity.
Oh, thank you so much, Carmy. That was just beautiful. Yeah, it was just magical and sort of ethereal and just lovely, all around lovely. So thank you so much. We're definitely going to want to hear that. Yes, extra bonus points. Said Bonnie said, lovely to hear it in your voice. So that was really beautiful. All right. Now I am excited because the next book I'm going to share with you, and the next author I'll be sharing with you, is a book that I've seen a few times as it was making its way towards publication. So one of the most wonderful things for me as a chance who has had a chance to work and mentor with people is to see books as they evolve. So next up is Lena Gibson. She's a storyteller as an elementary school teacher, and she's the keeper of family lore. She holds a first-class honors degree in archaeology with minors in history, biology, geography, and environmental education from SFU, Simon Fraser University. She's a voracious reader since the age 8 onwards, and she seeks wonderful books in which to escape. Because of her passion for different genres, she combines elements of many in her writing. As an adult newly recognized with autism, she loves to create characters that reflect that individual experience. When she isn't writing, she's reading, practicing karate, and drinks a ton of tea. Girl after my own heart. She resides in New Westminster, Canada with her family and their fuzzy overlord, Ash, the fluffiest of gray cats. Today, she's going to be sharing and talking with us from her first book, but I happen to know it's not going to be her last, as she just recently heard this week that her publisher is going to be taking on a couple more of her books, so that is excellent news. But today, she's going to be reading from The Edge of Life. Take it over to Lena. Tell us about this one.
So I wrote this in the summer of 2021, and I got the idea to write this story from seeing an online ad for Vivos X Point, a bunker complex in South Dakota that's built on a decommissioned military base. Its location is said to be ideal to withstand nuclear attacks in major cities, climate change, rising sea levels, volcanic eruptions, even if there was a blast from Yellowstone. And at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, the bunkers started selling like hotcakes. But since the end of the world didn't happen, many of them have been turned into vacation properties and are decorated like luxury cabins. So that's where the idea came from. It arrives in stores April 6th, so my book birthday is on Thursday. From the back of the book, it says, to cope with everyday life, neurodivergent Kat is a secret binge drinker, and jilted Ryan is a workaholic. Disillusioned, neither does more than go through the motions of living. Then comes the asteroid. Warned that a planet-killing asteroid is on a collision course with Earth, acquaintances Kat and Ryan join forces to survive. Mere hours before impact, they race toward the safety of Ryan's inherited South Dakota bunker, encountering chaos. Earthquakes, fire, and volcanic ashfall assail Kat and Ryan, who turn to each other for solace. Though jaded, they learn to trust and rely on one another. Attempting to survive the onslaught of their new world, Kat and Ryan must reach the bunker before imminent food shortages and catastrophic climate change cause society to further unravel. With steamy romance and nonstop action, this is one thrilling apocalypse road trip you shouldn't miss. And the piece I chose is not chapter 1. It's actually from chapter 7, when the main characters learn that the asteroid will in fact hit. It's not a maybe, it's not all the other things the government is going to do. This is the last chance. So here we go. A few minutes before 6 p.m., Ryan pulled off the road, leaving the car running while Kat flipped on the radio. Her heart was stuck in her throat while they searched for a signal. Time slowed as she wiped her damp palms before she scrolled to find a station that was clear and broadcasting in the area. At a crackle, she stopped and zeroed in on the sound. They listened to a 2-minute countdown that stretched for an eternity. Kat gripped Ryan's hand when it reached 30 seconds until launch. She was shaking. Ryan flashed her a nervous grin at the contact. We should watch. There must be a live feed somewhere. Without dropping her hand, he set his phone on the console between them, and his other hand trembled. They leaned together over the small picture when he found a live video, but it was hard to see anything. 3, 2, 1, launch, came the radio voice. The nuclear missiles are on their way. Official confirmation of missile launches from America, Russia, China, and Israel. Kat held her breath while they waited with the radio on, hoping for an update. Everything fell silent as the world waited. Reports say the missiles are on target. A short commentary summarized how the nuclear weapons were supposed to work. It droned on, but Kat didn't absorb the information. Sweat dripped from her forehead and her mouth felt like a desert while they waited for the missiles to strike. The screen went blank. There must be nothing new to show. They focused all their attention on the radio, where the silence was deafening. 6 minutes later came a distinct and familiar voice, the Vice President of the United States. The missiles have struck 2025 NR. Repeat, the nuclear missiles have struck 2025 NR. The asteroid has cracked into several pieces, as scientists who have monitored our Century Defense Program had hoped. The Vice President didn't sound quite as pleased as those words might indicate, and the hair on Kat's arms lifted. There was more. Several pieces of the asteroid remain large enough to cause significant damage when they strike the Earth. Prepare for impacts of varying sizes across Western North America, Eastern Russia, China, and Japan. Pieces will rain down through the middle and northern latitudes. Smaller, more erratic chunks knocked from their original trajectory will strike the Midwest, Mexico, and Brazil, starting in the west and moving to the east. Stay inside. If your location is within a strike zone, retreat underground if possible. Your local emergency broadcast systems will sound after this broadcast in regions most likely to be affected. Kat took a deep breath, thinking it was over, but the voice continued. Residents of the Western United States of America need to prepare for the worst. The single largest piece, maybe as much as a third of the meteor, remains intact. The estimated time to the Los Angeles area impact is less than 1 hour. May God have mercy on our souls. Let us pray for those in California. Ryan switched off the radio. His mouth was flat, his face expressionless. We need to drive. Every mile might count. Even with optimal driving conditions, the bunker is 2 to 3 days away. But despite his urgent words, he didn't put the car in drive and stepped out of the vehicle. He retrieved Fat Kat's phone from the back, passing it to her as he sat down. She waited for him to say something, but he didn't. He turned his phone over several times in his hand before putting it on the charger without making a call or even sending a text. He took a deep breath and pulled off the shoulder, driving east in the time they had left. Kat's heart lodged in her throat as she tried to process the information from the Vice President's message. The asteroid impact would be in less than an hour. Would they feel the California impact here? California didn't feel very far away. Her shoulders hurt from the tension. The horror story version of events was about to play out, and for all their preparations, she wasn't ready. She turned on her phone and sent a last message to her family. I love you, followed by a small purple heart. She left her phone on for 5 minutes while Ryan stared out the front window and the radio fell silent. She was heartbroken when there was no reply. Maybe the systems were busy or nobody in her family was near their phone. Ryan's too state remained blank and silent. Then both phones buzzed. She jumped when the anticipated warning of the emergency broadcast system arrived via text. Seek shelter. That's it.
Thank you so much. Those people who are ready to get their emergency kits out. I noticed that Jackie was sweating in particular because she lives in SoCal, so she wants to know why it has to land right there. So thanks to that.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Jackie.
It's all right. There are other people who are thinking, that, sometimes the world might do a little bit better with a little asteroid clearing things out. We shall see. But certainly not where Jackie is or any of our other friends. All right. The next book I am also very pleased, as I am with all of them, to introduce. This is a book that for me is interesting because this is where I freely admit that I am not someone who generally likes a lot of fantasy novels. So when I first heard about this novel, I agreed to, help read and be a part of it, thinking to myself, like, I just find my way through it. And what I ended up finding is that I fell in love with dragons. And I suspect that you will as well. So this is a book from Bonnie Jacoby. She writes adventurous fantasy and futuristic science fiction for teens. She's a resident of beautiful Pacific Northwest, and her love for nature is reflected in her stories, transporting readers to worlds that are both familiar and fantastical. With her debut novel, Dreams of a Dragon Girl, Bonnie paints a magical world bound by the power of dragons. Follow the story of a young girl as she discovers her own hidden strengths and learns to stand up for those in need. Bonnie's stories are not just about adventure and heroism, but also about understanding and acceptance of all beings, no matter how different they may seem. One day, dragons will return, and Bonnie fully intends to be their champion to ensure that they never disappear again. Please welcome Bonnie.
Thanks, Eileen. So this is my book. It came out on March 28th, and I just got the paper copies like yesterday, 2 days ago. So yes, I have a very cute and embarrassing unboxing video online because, I understand that's a thing and I tried it. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but it certainly is me, as people can attest. I started this book in 2013, and then I had written some other things, so it got put away for a little bit to sit because I am a lover of the Dragon Rider series by Anne McGaffrey, and it felt a little bit too much like a copy of that. So I needed to learn the ropes, learn and understand writing, and try different things to get my own voice. And then I rewrote it, and I felt I needed some help. So I actually employed the wonderful Eileen as a mentor to help me to bring my story to life. And I learned a lot during that process. So this book has basically been my whole journey of learning to be a writer and learning how to get all the wonderful things in my head onto the page, because I thought I did, and you'd look at it and you'd go, that doesn't really sound like what's in my head. So I am thrilled to finally have this book out and to feel that it accurately represents the world that's in my head. The story is which one am I going to pick? There we go. See, I already forgot my page. In a world where dragons were exterminated long ago to stop the dragon plague, one girl believes that history was wrong. And when dragons return, her new empathic power is unlocked, and she aids a young dragon in a quest to save dragons from extinction. And I am reading from the very first chapter, so that makes that pretty easy. Let's find it here. Chapter 1, Expectations. Becca loved dragons, not the plague-riddled beasts of history who were exterminated long ago. No, her heart belonged to the heroes from her grandfather's stories, intelligent creatures with complex relationships who explored the world and helped those in need. She bit her lip as she finished scribing Xanther's amusing first flight into her journal. One day, sooner than she could bear, these stories would be all she'd have left of her grandfather. With a sigh, she closed the journal and tucked it into her satchel, unwilling to dwell on a future without her grandfather. After grabbing her cloak from the hook by the front door, Becca left the house as silently as possible. If her mother caught her, she'd have to get her siblings up and she'd be late. Master Frederick needed her to help at the schoolhouse before the other students arrived. He'd barely made it through the lessons the day before. Sunlight reflected off the rivulets of melting snow as she strode along the cobbled streets of Chart's End. A strange heat wave settled in 2 days ago, and by noon it would be hotter than a midsummer day. The unseasonable weather during what should have been the coldest part of winter put everyone on edge. The more superstitious villagers claimed it was a bad omen. As she approached the Randall farm, Becca's heart lifted. For once, the dirt road was empty. No one to heckle her about her height or her red hair. Now there was a good omen, something more tangible than a little sunlight. Heat blasted her face as she entered the single-room schoolhouse. Master Frederick shuffled between the wooden desks, placing a single sheet of lined paper and a sharpened pencil on each one, preparing for the day. Healer's blessing. Even though pain filled his tired eyes, he managed a smile for her. Here, let me finish. You sit. The winter had not been kind to the eldest member of their village. At 55, he'd held the position of elder for 5 years, longer than anyone in the past. He'd been healthy, despite his age, but in the past 2 days, migraines had stolen his vigor. His frail body shook as she helped him to his chair in front of the fire he'd insisted on lighting, despite the hot weather. Thank the healer you've come early, Becca. I thought I was better today, but... He flapped his hand, then let it fall on his knee. Her heart ached for him. Teaching was his life. You have to take over. I just can't do this anymore. His words wrapped a chain around her neck. Everyone wanted her to be something. A lady, a dutiful daughter, and now a teacher. No one had offered to help in the classroom. The task had fallen to her. She didn't mind teaching once in a while, but taking his place was not an option. She was only 15. There was a whole world to explore, and her isolated village was stuck in the past. I'll take over today, but I'm sure the weather will let up and things will go back to how they should be. They had to. If she became the village teacher, her life would stop, but she wouldn't tell him that. He patted her hand. Nothing ever goes back. Life and time move forward always. After she set up the math test, Becca helped him to his cottage behind the schoolhouse and closed his shutters so the light wouldn't exacerbate his pain. His snores filled the tiny room before she closed the door. She returned to the schoolhouse, smothered the fire, opened the windows, and looked over the lesson book. The little ones would be easy, but the older students wouldn't like her telling them what to do, especially Nathan Randall. Just a few months older than her, he could do no wrong, at least in her mother's eyes. Becca pushed her shoulders back. It wasn't as if Nathan ever offered to help. If she stuck to the lesson plan, he couldn't object. But that was a foolish dream. She may as well wish for dragons to return. Chapter 2, Source Lake. Gregor. Dragons don't dream. But Gregor was trapped in a world that couldn't be real. He flapped his wings, catching a warm thermal, and flew through an impossibly brilliant blue sky. Cirrus clouds lurked in the distance, black instead of white. Faint rainbows rippled through the wisp, making them appear more fluid than mist. It must be a magical vision. He was no seer, but he lay within the source, a lake filled with the world's magic, so anything was possible. He reached out to the minds of the 128 dragons that made up his coven. They all slept at the bottom of the long lake, but no one was awake to give him an answer. He couldn't sense the water he knew surrounded him. Instead, the smooth glide of wind over his wings felt all too real. Magic wanted to show him something. Nutmeg, a human spice, filled his nostrils, his power trying to tell him something important. He tilted his left wing and followed the scent. Ever since his power had manifested a year ago, shortly after he turned 16, his sense of smell guided him. Magical scents warned him of danger, and other times they led him to safety. When a magical plague infected his coven, a powerful scent had warned him, and he fled and survived. His new coven had imposed a strict quarantine to keep them safe, But when Sari, another youngling like him, had learned about the source lake, she'd convinced the leader that magic was the only way to protect them. Gregor had followed the tantalizing odor of lilac to the lake. The coven had followed him, the youngest dragon at 17, despite the elders' dragon's protests. He hoped he'd done the right thing and hadn't led them all to their deaths. Maybe that's what this was. Death, not a vision. The scent of nutmeg filled his mind, replacing his fear and pulling him through the sky. He had no control over his path. The scent was all that mattered. Below him, a village huddled against the southern slope of the Dragon Mountain Range. Humans scurried about, busy with whatever it was they did. Their clothing was different, not the familiar shades of brown and green. Bold colors mixed with flashes of crisp white, weaving in and out in a chaotic pattern. A young girl with a crown of flames looked up and radiated waves of joy. The intensity of her emotions knocked him back a wingspan. No human could send thoughts over such a great distance. Gregor flew closer. Nutmeg, sweet and enticing. What did it mean? If he were a seer, the vision would provide answers. But he wasn't, and his own power caused him more frustration than certainty. The scent dissipated in the wind, done with him. Ominous clouds consumed the village and spread across the sky, black tendrils reaching for him in the last remaining patch of blue. Clouds couldn't hurt him, but he couldn't shake the dread that filled his chest. His wing strokes were sluggish, as if encased in water. He snorted, and bubbles rose from his snout. The sky bulged, and a loud plop resounded through the world. Ripples spread from the distortion. Clouds crashed together, turning the sky pitch black. Fear crashed through his heart. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. A tangle of oily threads coiled around him, and death dove through his nostrils.
Thank you, Bonnie.
You're welcome.
So that other people are falling in love with dragons. And it's almost enough to make me forgive you for making that 55 was basically an old crone. Almost enough to make me forgive you for that. All right. Thank you so much for that.
Hello, everyone. So it is my pleasure to introduce my partners, Eileen and Crystal, who are going to give us a reading from their latest Build Better Settings. So when they came to me and said they're writing a book on setting, I was like, okay, makes sense. In the list of Creative Academy guides, it's about time that we tackle setting, absolutely. But I should have known, because Crystal and Eileen never do anything basic, that they had a specific focus. So for those of us that sit on the setting fence, whether we love it or we grumble about it and bring us back to our elementary school when we were working on settings, wherever you sit on the settings fence, Crystal and Eileen are challenging you to view setting in a new and exciting way. To use it as a tool to show character arc in your fiction. So if you haven't picked up the book, I'm going to drop the link in the chat because it is very, very exciting read. And as always, it is filled with practical tips and exercises that make learning fun. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Eileen, who's going to read a little bit from the book.
Thank you, Steph. And thank you for making me not introduce myself, because that would have just been awkward and weird. All right, I'm just going to read a little bit to you. As Steph already told you, this book came about because we wanted to continue writing about different tips that writers need, and setting is the one that we think often gets overlooked. Since we called this book Build Better Settings, it seems only appropriate to use building and construction as an analogy. Instead of thinking of setting as a place to situate your story, we're going to ask you to think of setting as all the building materials you need for your story construction. Yes, there's other supplies you can and do use, but in this book, setting is going to be our main tool. In order to build, the first thing we need to do is clear the land. To give your story the best possible footing, we need to make certain we're all working on even ground. That's going to mean clearing out old attitudes, expanding your idea of what setting can mean, and ensuring that you understand what we mean by the term character arc. The second step is to build a foundation and gather your story building materials. To have a strong and stable story, you need a solid base. So we're going to introduce you to what we see as the fundamentals of setting. And that includes different levels of setting, your character's backstory, objects and symbols, and secondary characters. The third step is to build your setting around your growing and changing character. So we're going to take you through the 6 steps of character arc from their initial state to the completion of their journey. This is the framework you can use to build a setting, a home, for all the magic that you've been creating, including characters, plot, and theme. Most of us learned about setting in grade school. What you need to write a story, we were told, is a character with a goal, a problem for that character to try and solve in pursuit of that goal. That's what creates your plot, and a setting, someplace for your story to take place. Then if we continue digging into the craft of writing, we learned that setting isn't only where your story happens. We came to understand that the details you choose to include in your setting have meaning beyond the obvious. That creepy mansion can set the tone in a mystery. The thunder and lightning storm can foreshadow that something wicked this way comes. And the barren desert where your story starts can show the internal state of your character. This book is about how you can use setting to illustrate character arc. When it comes to defining setting, our perspective is fluid, which is a really nice way of saying pretty darn flexible. And for us, setting includes everything that surrounds that character, including the world around them, the time period, their personal space, even their clothing. But it's how setting and characters intersect that we found the most intriguing. And we certainly hope you will too, by the time you finished reading Build Better Settings. Crystal, I wonder if you can take us off by telling us, how did this book evolve from its original concept?
So originally when we sat down and we mapped out, okay, well, we've got this series, like Steph said, we have this glaring gap in the setting section of the Writerly Toolbox, and we roughed out an outline for a typical book about setting where we would tackle all of the usual things. But we didn't really think that would add so much. And so we started kind of brainstorming and looking for how do we take that a little bit deeper, or where is somewhere where we could really go in a little further and really make use of our particular skills and backgrounds, which does include the psychology stuff for both of us. And our passion is often how the things interact, not just how they do on their own. And we know that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck, is when you can combine those elements in really clever ways to really level up the meaning and the impact of your story in those higher level concepts. Now, that sounds all very like planned out and polished and professional when I say it like that. It was really more like, let's try and teach a workshop on this, and let's build a masterclass for Surrey around setting. And then as we were working through that process, we realized we totally weren't going to write the book we thought we were going to write. So the 2 years of, planning and plotting and scheming of what was going into this thing and the pulling all the stuff together was like out the window. So we started over, basically. We sat down with a new and very refined kind of a focus, and we thought, okay, how can we spin this in a way that's going to be really fun for us? Because every time we sat down to do it, we just found ourselves going down the rabbit hole of how the characters in their setting was interacting. So that's kind of how it came about. And it was about 3 years in the making, because once we did teach in a bunch of places and a bunch of the things, we refined what we thought about based on our conversations with many of you who have been in on those workshops and conversations. And then we bounced things over to Steph, and she's like, great, I totally don't get this stuff over here. So, not that. And also, how do we And then we, you know, back to the drawing board, and we reworked things so that what was in our brains could sort of get onto the paper in a more clear fashion for other people. And then, of course, we got Amanda involved. And if you watched her workshop on editing on last week's session, you have a sense of if we give her free rein, she's pretty hands-on. And because her husband is also a contractor in construction, she was able to make sure our metaphor legit made sense and worked throughout the book as well with all of our building stuff. So it was really, really fun. And it did really evolve over the time of its thing. And I think it's just a really neat example of when you have both an amazing team of creative people around you who can give you all that feedback and you can evolve around it, it really can level up your work, and the time and space for things to naturally become what they want to become is also really important for our storytelling. So we were really, it was really a wonderful thing to work on. And we had all of those things, both a great team and the time and space to let it become what it wanted to become. So very, very fun to work on. And I'm curious, Eileen, what for you, was there something that you learned during the process of this that kind of surprised you, or just was you thought very interesting for folks?
I think for me, the favorite part that we started talking about is when we expanded setting. So we started talking about like the typical things we think about, the world, the community, maybe someone's house. But where it really got interesting is when we started talking about how setting could be things like clothing. So the very items that we sort of drape on ourselves to tell about ourselves, and also what was happening inside of our own minds. So that definitely added to it. So Crystal, you came up with the idea of the attic. Did you want to tell people what that was?
So we live in our thoughts, really. And our mind is essentially a setting for our being, for ourselves, like the part of us that does the thinking and operates the machinery, which is the rest of us out in the larger world, is also kind of a setting. And so we did have this idea of the attic of the house is the thoughts of your character, because really everything else that's physically manifested in the setting starts in your mind. It starts in that attic of your character. And so that was an interesting addition. We had a few heated debates and discussions in the editorial comments and in real life about what could be setting or not be setting. And so, like Eileen said in the passage that she read, we went with a bit of a fluid definition that suited our purposes. But I think that was a really neat way of thinking of it, because we don't often think of thoughts as our setting, but they do. They are the setting in which our soul lives, or our consciousness lives, however you want to put that together. So that was kind of a neat way of just bringing in some of that stuff and finding that intersection between the characters, and our insides make it to the outsides of us as we look around at all of our backgrounds. It's really interesting to see even our Zoom backgrounds or our homes behind us. You can see reflections of who we are inside in the attics of our mind is what trickles down into the rest of the house. And it's also kind of a secret place, right? The attic is often, we stuff stuff up in the attic and we close the door and we just kind of pretend it's not there. And only really certain people might be allowed to poke around in it. Maybe nobody, maybe just us, but we know all those things are there and it's informing what happens. So it was kind of a neat also way to think about secrets and who you let into your world really, and where are they allowed in the house, and how do you explore those different locations to different degrees. So it's really it was really a fun way to explore that. And Bailey was also a really fun addition to the mix, because some of these concepts are really hard to illustrate or to explain or to talk about when you start digging in a little deeper than like, okay, spooky house equals spooky atmosphere, or ominous thunder rolls and the clouds come in and we have this creepy sort of situation going on. But Bailey was a really fun addition. I'm going to bounce it over to Eileen, because she really helped bring Bailey to life.
So Bailey is the example that we used throughout the story to give practical examples, because we knew exactly what we meant. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience. We know exactly what we were trying to communicate. And then we would bounce it over to Steph, who would be like, Wow, this sounds great. I have no idea what you're talking about. And so we came up with a story that involves a character named Bailey. And we used her throughout the story to sort of give examples. And that gave a context and hopefully a way for people to sort of understand how they could apply this to their own writing.
And Bonnie Bailey's not a clueless writer. We wrote a story about her. She is a character in a story, but we wanted everybody to have the same context because we found ourselves quoting, well, this book or that movie or that whatever as a way to illustrate an example. But then most people haven't seen all the same things or read all the same books. And so we wrote a story, a fiction story, which we then put excerpts of in the book. So you get to meet Bailey and have some adventures with her.
So the only clueless writer was Crystal and I. So that's how that worked. But yes, I think anyone who's had my office hours know I repeat all the time that it's not what happens to our characters. It's the story that they tell themselves about what happens. And I think that's a really nice segue to reminding us about each of the pieces that we came through. So we have Gabby's character who's going to find her way to love and how she interprets love and what happens to her within that library and the people that she meets. Carmy's character, I just don't want to say with the perfect name of Eileen, as they go on a magical adventure. I love that. Lena's character, of course, is facing the end of the world. But, people face that type of thing with very different attitudes. And so it's how that character approaches the world. And of course, if you've ever wanted to know how dragons were going to face things, and then you have to be certain to check out Bonnie's story. We're coming to the end, but I do want to leave a little bit of time. So two things. I'm going to have all the writers, I know they did before, but I'm going to ask them to put one more time. To put a link in for their pieces so people can find it. I'm going to put a link into the Creative Academy. For those of you who haven't joined us before, if you're working on any type of story, nonfiction or fiction, we would love to see that. And I want to make sure if there were any questions that we did get them answered. I was trying to keep track of things as they scrolled by. But if someone had a pressing question, we can probably squeak in one or two before people run off on their Saturday. Thank you to everyone who came. Always appreciated. And yeah, Kevin bumping his head on the attic, which is, as a psychologist, I'm like, we should have you lie down and we'll talk about that for a while, Kevin, about what's going on for you. But yeah, there's some absolutely wonderful books. And I love all the support that we have for these writers today. I cannot wish them more luck with their journey. May all the readers find your stories, everyone, because they're fantastic. I've had a chance to have my nose in each of these books, and I feel all the much better for it. Anything I haven't thought of, Crystal, that you can think of?
Well, if we were in person, we would all be like hugging each other right now with our books up to take a picture. So I just would love if everybody can hold up their books and we'll just do a quick screenshot. Steph, can you screenshot it? Because I'm going to hold the book and be authoring.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
And Erin will Photoshop yours in so that we have the cover of your Kindle in there too for our center screenshot there, which will be great. And I think we're so excited for everybody. It's so fun to see everyone launching things. And somebody asked, are we going to do this again? And yes, we do. We do this quarterly. So every 3 months or so, we do this event. If there's lots more new books coming out, maybe we'll do it more often. But for the moment, the plan is quarterly. So if you are looking to celebrate your own launch of your shiny new book or publication, then let us know and keep an eye on the feed in the community, because Eileen will post when the next one is coming up and when spots can be claimed. And then we are always happy to celebrate. And in the interim, post in the new release promo section of the community and make sure you share your cover and the link to your book so we can all celebrate in the in-between times as well.
That sounds perfect. So now it is a Saturday, which hopefully means everyone has some time to go and get some reading done. With any luck, you have just ordered yourself some new books, so you have a stack of new things to read, even if you're at a baseball game. Baseball has a lot of downtime, Jackie. Lots of time for reading. All right. Thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday. And thanks to everyone who joined us from Spain and Germany and all the places in between.